Hello and welcome to another episode of Critical Conversations. It's Monday, December 2nd, 2024, and I'm your host, Ayan Tariq.
This is Critical Conversations, brought to you by University of Toronto.
Brazil is currently seeking to make great strides in the world of innovation and sustainable development. Last year, the recently re-elected President Lula da Silva introduced his government's industrial policy, Nova Industria Brazil. This policy reflects an ambitious agenda spanning across 6 key industries, including agricultural, environmental sustainability, and defense sectors. While supporters claim this is a move in the right direction, some critics have suggested that focusing on a key area, such as critical minerals, could be a more effective strategy. I have JP and Lauren from the Mineral Policy Consulting firm and Amelia with the Brazilian government here to discuss new policy recommendations on critical minerals in Brazil. Thank you so much for being here today. And so to start us off, JP, you've emphasized the importance of critical minerals in your work before. Can you elaborate more on that?
Absolutely. So we see an opportunity to increase critical mineral extraction and production to support each Nova industrial policy. Critical minerals support agricultural production through the growth inputs to fertilizers and farming equipment. In health and defense sectors, they're crucial for producing things like X-ray machines and aerospace technologies. Regarding the urban well-being goal, they're necessary for battery production and electrification of road transportation. To scale digitization and semiconductor manufacturing in the country, critical minerals are essential components. And finally, the bioeconomy, decarbonization, and energy security mission can't happen without these commodities. Mining companies also play a crucial role in technology and knowledge transfers in things like sustainable infrastructure development practices. By emphasizing critical minerals in the policy, Brazil can better ensure its autonomy in all of the mentioned sectors.
Amelia, the changes that JP just discussed represents a very different path to achieve the goals outlined in Nova Industria. What do you think this policy actually needs to work in reality?
So to kind of set the scene here, about 4% of Brazil's GDP is within the critical minerals sector, but our production level is not reflective of our resource shares. China buys about $23 billion worth of our critical minerals and the US $13 billion every year. And a policy like this is very ambitious, but relative to its infrastructure, it would require a well-outlined road infrastructure plan that would be both sustainable and environmentally conscious, as well as take into consideration things like the electrification of our mines, because Brazil is on a low carbon grid, the reduction in water consumption through things like circularity, best-in-class waste practices to avoid things like tailing dams. This is a difficult balance to navigate here. You're striking kind of a balance between preserving and preservation of the rainforest and things like that, as well as ensuring that there is access to those critical minerals. And recently, in the last couple of years, Brazil has expanded its geological mapping systems, which lend a helping hand because previously we only had about 27% of our landmass covers. But on a whole, within all policy implementation in Brazil, there's a need for a strong regulatory agency to ensure compliance while also trying to avoid things like licensing bottlenecks. And it's important that there's always community engagement, jobs that are provided with high security standards and safety standards, as well as adequate capacity building for future elaborations on a policy.
Thank you so much. Lauren, in one of his many op-eds, JP makes mentions of geopolitical opportunities in the form of partnerships with foreign firms and trade. In your expert opinion, does this even make sense?
Yeah, so this type of policy adoption for Brazil makes a lot of sense strategically. The energy transition race is an opportunity for mineral-rich countries like Brazil to strengthen their emerging industries and bolster their position in the global value chain. Brazil has what foreign firms and countries within the EU, US, and China want in their mineral reserves, which puts Brazil in a position to be a key supplier and partner for the energy transition technology needed. Not only this, but Brazil is uniquely positioned due to its focus on environmental sustainability to develop greener infrastructure to fill those processing gaps. And as JP touched on, this opportunity puts Brazil in a powerful position for national security and to maximize its geopolitical standing through diversifying its partnership base and export markets. Since various states are keen on partnering with Brazil in this sector, the country can orientate itself strategically within the EU and US through avenues such as free trade agreements, while maintaining relationships with China to not rely too heavily on one market or the other. Brazil is already utilizing more sustainable mining practices, attracting private investment, taking control of regional mining blocks, as well as enhancing its role in the energy transition in general.
Thank you so much. So we've covered here today some key topics in Brazil's innovation journey and the role critical minerals can play. Thank you so much for joining me in this discussion today, guys.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thanks for having us.
Click the subscribe button below and keep an eye out for next week's episode, where we sit down with Scott McKnight, PhD, to discuss his research on oil sector strategies for states in the global south like Mexico, China, and Brazil.